Hello everybody, welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, bringing you another very special video as we continue our series of how Harry Potter should be adapted for HBO. And of course, in the second episode, I'm going to be talking about the second book, The Chamber of Secrets, which we know based off some media reports is going to be filming, not naturally straight after season one, but quote, within a short break after season one wraps in spring of 2026. So this is likely a series that's already in the writing phase. I'm assuming there's already a writer's room working on it. These guys have obviously got to do 7 seasons worth of TV in about 10 years, so there's not going to be much of a break for them at all. And I'm going to be talking today, following on from last week's video, about how I would love to see this series adapted for HBO, and kind of going with the theme of what I spoke about last week. You can of course catch up to the Philosopher's Stone video. That's a lot longer than today's going to be. 35 minutes to do the first 3 episodes. Don't worry, it's not going to be like this. Obviously there was so much to set up and so much to create in that first season. It should be a little bit quicker, at least until we get to the Goblet of Fire, and when we get to those much larger books as the series is going to develop. But kind of what I said in the original, I have read every single book this year. It's the first time in around about 10 years I've read them all, and whilst I've been reading them, I've been making notes, going back to them, putting stuff in different seasons, things I like to see, characters that could crop up earlier, characters that could be explored, or ideas. Since beginning this at the start of the year, there's obviously been casting announcements, filming's now taking place. For example, Lucius Malfoy has been cast for season 1, so as has Cornelius Fudge. So there may be instances where my notes have had to actually change to maybe reflect that. And like I kind of want to do with this isn't me saying I expect or demand this to be done the way it is. I think there's a fine line between people that do content creation online, where I think Star Wars is a better example of this. Star Wars 7 didn't go the way I wanted it to go, that was in my head for 20 years. And then they scream and cried. It's very valid to criticise a film or a piece of media, of course it is when you've seen it. But your opinion of how I wanted it to be, that invalidates that criticism of that. If that is the only context you have is, I didn't want it to do this, it's not how it works. Go get yourself a director or producer's job to make an answer for that. So I'm hoping to have a bit of fun with this, and this is how I would like to do it. This is how I would do it if I did run it. But I don't run it. I'm not a writer. I'm not a showrunner. I'm not an actor. I'm not a producer or a director. I'm here to work online, and this is for a bit of fun. This is to build up, I guess, a bit of momentum for the series, something I love to do. Books I've obviously known since I was younger, something I've been reading again for the first time in a long time, and yeah, that's kind of as much as I'm going to do with a generic intro for this one. I'm going to go through my criteria as I'll do on every single video. So I have set some ground rules. Number 1 is it had to be set in the 90s. We know this is obviously happening thanks to set photos. Number 2, there has to be 8 episodes per season. That is a rule I'm enforcing. There may be instances in latter seasons where I extend episode lengths, and that's not me doing a cop-out. That HBO do that with some of their shows. Last of Us, for example, had I think an hour and a half season 1, episode 1, yet some episodes were sort of 40-50 minutes, so it wouldn't be taking the mick doing that. It'd be taking the mick if I did it every week, but there will be instances in which I choose to make a certain episode a longer, and I'll specify how much longer, not just until it's done. And I have to have come up with episode titles and to make sure they're not used twice. Again, it's a minor one, that's more for a bit of fun at my end. And the one thing I've really loved to see, which I'm doing in every single season, is I'm opening every single season with a cold open mystery. Because if you look at those books, there is a mystery of every single book. It's essentially in the title bar, The Order of the Phoenix, I guess you could say. It sets up a, what is this, how did this happen? And I'd like to see a cold open scene to set a mystery up, to then be answered in maybe one of the later episodes, maybe the final episode of a season. And Chamber of Secrets is very much a mystery type one, so I'm excited to talk about that. And that being said, I think that's everything I can say on an intro. Like I said in the first one, if I'm looking down a lot, it's because my laptop notes are directly below. I can't do this just looking at a camera. That would be completely absurd and impossible. But I will be talking about each of the episodes, what I'd like to see, what I think could work respectively from the book scenes coming into the show. I haven't added and elaborated scenes, but there may be instances in which I have added characters in who weren't there before, or maybe chucked in some relative flashbacks, because there will be a big one in this I do want to talk about. So there's a bit of criteria from me. As always, please do comment your thoughts. I'd like to know what people think of this, what they want to see in the series, what they're looking forward to, maybe the book they're looking forward to seeing the most as well. I think The Chamber of Secrets is the shortest book in the series, and yet I'm still doing 8 episodes for it. From memory, it's about 240 pages, although I believe apparently the book page lengths have now changed too, which is very strange. I think when they did the new artwork don't know how many years ago that was now. I think the text or the font or something's changed. So what apparently was the same when I was younger isn't the same anymore. So I don't know. But I will be obviously dividing this up into 8, and I have my episodes. And I guess that's the best time to open up with Season 2, Episode 1. Episode 1, The Burrow. Okay, so the cold open for Season 2, I mean, we know about the Chamber of Secrets, the presumption that everyone has read them or at least seen the films, or the other way around. And the mystery is going to be what happened 50 years ago when the Chamber of Secrets opens. Now, through knowledge, we know that obviously it was Moaning Myrtle that was killed. But if you are setting up a mystery to the viewers, people who you have to pretend haven't read or haven't seen the films, then it's so essential to get these cold opens to set up the intrigue. So my idea is to have the 50 years ago, have the original Chamber of Secrets, and having the dead body being taken out of Hogwarts School. As simple as that, you could look to see if there's, not show the beast itself, the basilisk, but you could do something really fun with that to set up this terrible thing happened all these decades ago, because it's still an unanswered case. Whilst Hagrid was obviously later on sent down for that, irrespectively and incorrectly, it's something that's got a big importance of this. So yeah, we've got to open up with the dead student being taken out of the school, showing the school in peril, then zipping to 50 years later, however it will be, because this is obviously going to be another summer with the Dursleys, Harry's first summer back after returning to Hogwarts. And this summer in particular, after how I spoke about ending Season 1, you've got to really bring up the fact that Ron and Hermione are going to write to him. We know a big part of the summer is the fact that Harry isn't having anything written to him from his friends. His post is going missing, no one's reached out to him, he's got no outside contact. And you can play that up in the opening episode to a short amount of time. We've got him going into his new bedroom. He gets Dursley's second bedroom to himself, which is obviously going to be part of what happens with Dobby later on. So we can play up that side of things, and we can really show him being miserable, not just one scene of him looking glum in bed. We can just have a quick montage of the first few weeks, seeing how it's been. We've got to build up for those later seasons, how Hogwarts does become his home, how it has to mirror Tom Riddle in that respect. And this would be a big part of it, having him being treated terribly by Dudley, by the others. And that's going to lead us into meeting who will go on to be one of the most important characters of the series, which is Dobby. Obviously, he appeared in far more than just the second and the last books. For people that haven't read them, he is the reason Harry has Gillyweed in the Goblet of Fire. He finds or helps find the Room of Requirement in the 5th one. And he's got key involvement in all of this, particularly when he gets to the House Elf type stuff. So I think it's essential to nail Dobby in the second season. We know he's a core part of it, that he's trying to protect Harry for reasons we do not know yet, that there is a grave threat coming. And we can have the moment where we've got the Dursleys having their business meeting downstairs, Harry upstairs meeting Dobby, finding out this is the person who has tried to make it his goal of Harry to not go back to Hogwarts because something terrible is going to happen. And we don't know what that is. And we've already seen something terrible happen in the cold open, so that's where I'm going with this. We've got to bring in Dobby. We've got to have the moment of him doing the magic, Harry getting not framed for it as such, but we've got to build up the Dursley divide, because we know we're going to end up with him being locked in that bedroom for a while. And we've got another essential part of this, because obviously the 5th one, there's such a huge moment in which Harry's expelled from Hogwarts. We need to really start bringing the Ministry of Magic a little bit earlier. We need to have the letter from the Ministry that goes to Harry that the Dursleys will hear, which is him essentially being warned about doing magic outside of school. They need to find out that he isn't allowed to do magic outside of school, and that's a big moment in there in how they are with him. Due to that they're able to be a lot stricter, a lot nastier to him. So we can build up a lot of fun with the Dursleys again, because they are comic relief. As authors, they are their comic relief. And I think Season 2 is going to be quite dour, if I'm completely honest, in terms of enjoyment, happiness, all that sort of stuff. It does get very mysterious as it develops, and it gets a lot sort of nasty on what happens to younger students. So you've got to bring them in for the comedy moments. You've got to have them locked up. We have to have, of course, the Ford Anglia, the escape with Fred, George and Ron. That's a big part of what happens. Obviously, the flying car is a big part of this season. And you can't just have them appear one night that he's locked in. You need to have that build up. And I think the way you can do the first episode, obviously by the title I called it The Burrow, we can lead up to the Burrow, which does become a big location for the future 6 seasons. We do go back there almost every season. It is Harry's sort of second home after Hogwarts, I guess you could say. And I think if we've got them travelling back in the night, we can also talk about Lucius Malfoy, the fact that their dad's working overtime, and there's loads of ministry raids on dark magic, because that's going to be important to why the book is given to Ginny later on. So we've got to play up the fact that there's some Lucius involvement. We need to start building up that there is something with Lucius Malfoy and something with Mr. Weasley. So we can start to build that in the first episode. And when we get to the Burrow, this is a huge moment. And like this second episode of the first season when I spoke about going to Diagon Alley for the first time, it is building up that world, the wizarding world itself, no pun intended. You need to see these locations, spend time in these locations, see how people live in them. This is the first time he's going into like a magical person's home, and this is for a humongous family as well. So this is a big moment, this is a big scene, and it's fine to have a lot of patience, whether it's just him walking around, taking it in, not losing too much time. We've got to have the moments of Mrs. Weasley kicking off at the boys for going out in the night. We have to have her ultimately being happy Harry is with them, but her not telling him off, telling off the others. We then get to meet Mr. Weasley for the first time, who obviously is a massive player for the rest of the series. Very wisely being put in the second book. I chose not to put him in the first season. I still don't think we will. I like the fact they meet through these circumstances, that Harry's already got a little bit of knowledge that something's going on with the Malfoys in the background, because he's going to play a big part, especially when you're bringing the ministry type context into the kids' environment. Mr. Weasley fits that perfectly. So this is quite a chilled episode as such. It's not lazy, nothing's happening, but I didn't want to put too much in here. And I'm also trying to pad out the fact that this is a smaller book. We can't go in with everything guns blazing. We can certainly set things up. But the first episode, I've called it the Burrow. It's going to be around the Burrow, spending time with the family, Ginny fancying Harry, her being shy around him. That's got a big part of where the book goes later on in this season, and obviously their future relationship and family. So this is huge. And how I want the first episode to end is them doing the flu powder to get to Diagon Alley for purchasing one of their books, because that is a big thing. We get to spend time with the Weasleys, we get to see that they're financially not all there, and there needs to start building up that, not jealousy from Ron, but Harry having that knowledge that not everybody has been as fortunate as him respectively in regards to wealth in the wizarding world, and seeing their family dynamics is what he craves more than wealth can give him. And this is a great way to start developing the Weasley family. So that's my first episode. Episode 2, Nocturne Alley. So the way I want episode 2 to start, we've had the flu powder, we know he hasn't gone to Diagon Alley, he's going to wake up at Borgin and Burke's. And this is very much a throwaway scene in this book, but there is an implication of this scene for where this series is going to go. You can go so far to the Horcruxes in Half-Blood Prince that Voldemort worked here. Isn't just a shop that sells dark magic. This almost is dark magic. You need to really build up. This is a big location, granted we're not going to spend time there. There is a history there. There is a sort of living part of this. And for Harry to end up in there, whilst we're going to have Lucius coming in, who is offloading some more of his dark magic, we can then get his point of view on the raid that's going on. We know he's trying to essentially empty the mana from as much as he can. We obviously get a bit of time with Draco spent here. We've got his dad sort of berating Draco for not being as well academically as Hermione and a couple of others. So we're going to get Harry's outside view on Lucius with Draco, and I think we get to really start to build up the fact that Lucius is just a terrible father. That not that we sympathise with Draco Malfoy at this point in time, but you can start to see the shell that he is this kid that has just been raised the way he has by his dad. Everything that he has presumptive on other people is through his parents' teaching, and he is to the smallest extent a victim of this. And I like to see this by having the Borgin and Burke sequences, and I've put it as a full caps note. We have to have the Vanishing Cabinet visible in here, because that does play a part. And if we play up a scenario where it's been sat there for years and years, they've never found the other half, but it's just there, that's going to have a big callback moment and would work really well as a nice little Easter egg for the later ones. So I've got that in there, and we're not going to spend too much time in Nocturne Alley. Grant, I've put that as the title. We've obviously got Hagrid pulling Harry out of there, and we're going to have him making his way to Flourish and Blotts, where we are going to have a book signing. They've obviously got to pick up their new books, but we are going to have the introduction of, I think, the season's MVP, Gilderoy Lockhart. I cannot wait for whoever they cast for this. I can't wait to see him given more extended screen time. Sir Kenneth Branagh's performance is one of my favourite Harry Potter characters. It's absurd, it's ridiculous, but he's entirely hilarious. The fact Dumbledore sees through him from day one, know he's a fraud. You can start playing that up as early as this, chasing the celebrity status, the autographs, wanting the photos with Harry, giving him all the free books, having Mrs. Weasley, Hermione and Ginny all fawning over him. There's a lot of fun to be had in the Flourish and Blutz scenes, and I think this is a great way to introduce him because he's a huge part of the season, and we get to see more of that Weasley dynamic. We get to see the Grangers as well, spending time there. We've got the moment where we've got Draco still being a bully and awful to the other kids whilst in Flourish and Blutz. And we can have a big confrontation sequence, which is going to be Mr. Weasley and Lucius Malfoy literally having a fight in Flourish and Blutz, separated by Hagrid. You can play that up. It will work fine in a TV show. You're being given the length to develop those a little bit more. Yes, it's great. There's a war of words in the films, but to have them actually just going at each other so quickly, so early, it only builds up for when we're going to get more stuff down the line in later books with the pair of them. So a lot of fun to be had here. And again, we're not going to drag things out too much. We do want to be at Hogwarts by the end of the second episode. This isn't the first season. We don't want to take 3 episodes to get there. They should really be there by the end of the second one. So I'm going to have platform 9 3/4 in this episode. And what I want to do with this, and I'm sort of maybe jumping in too much from Flourish and Blotz, we need to have a moment where Malfoy gets obviously the book into Ginny's bag or however she's going to do it. It doesn't need to be in a close-up or anything at all, but it does need to be visible to the smallest extent that it can be revisited later on in the season, because there's got to be a reason and an understanding of how that got there, why Lucius wanted it there. The fact he hates Ron Weasley, the fact he doesn't like Muggleborns, all that sort of stuff can be part of it, but he's ultimately just getting rid of more evidence from his house, from his raid. And yeah, you've got to put it in the Flourish and Blotz sequence because that's got a big part. Platform 9 3/4, we're obviously going to have it sealed off so that Harry and Ron can't go. We can get the scene of them flying to Ford Anglia. This is the big thing of why this has to be set in the 90s. If this was set in modern day, there's a flying car in London, CCTV cameras, phones, everyone would catch it. I know it's a really stupid, minor thing, but having that contextual 90s settings, you can at least show the 90s London to the smallest of extents. And you can have a little bit of fun with this, and you can have them driving up to Hogwarts, which we obviously know is going to lead to the Whomping Willow, which is also a massive part of this episode. We know it's going to have a bigger part in the third season. And it's going to crop up in the Deathly Hallows. The Whomping Willow is part of the school. So you can have the sequence, Ron having his wand snapped, which is important. The car almost turning on them, them barely surviving it. We can have the sorting ceremony, them missing it. You could interweave something really cool. We could see Ginny being seated there. We can have her go into Gryffindor. We can start to play up her a little bit more because she does obviously have a big role to play in this season. I'm not saying bringing someone like Luna Lovegood, but the second years, there's a few of them. So there is a way to mirror sequences of Harry and Ron missing the feast versus there'll be the new year ones getting sorted, because some of these characters, we've got Colin Creevey in there as well. Luna technically comes in for a later season. There are other characters that are going to be a part of this. So I'd like to see them do that. But where I want this episode to end is Snape going out to the Whomping Willow, obviously finding them, being terrible to them, being awful to them as he does, and him saying that he wants them expelled. So you leave it on that sort of cliffhanger of, well, they wanted him to be the villain of season 1 and he wasn't. And we can go back to the fact that they both hate him and he hates them right at the start of season 2, episode 2. I think it's a great way to do it. And we can obviously have the fact that McGonagall makes sure they don't get expelled. So we can end this in the school, but it's almost like the first night ended and they barely got away with it, which leads into the next one. Episode 3, The Howler. Okay, so this is a smaller book. So the third episode, we need to start spending time at school again. The what's going on of Hogwarts is a mystery in the second season. That there are moments that start at Halloween where we're starting to see students being attacked, all weird things going on. So unfortunately, we've got to spend a lot of time with them in their day-to-day, them with their school lives. So I think a great way to open this would be like breakfast the second day, Ron getting the Howler, introducing howlers as a concept. There's a lot of comedy with that to be done, but I think you can then use that to start going into some of the lessons, because we've got 2 pivotal lessons in the earliest stages of the second season. We have to have the herbology lesson where we learn about the mandrakes. We know obviously they're essential by the end of the season, and obviously we get to use them as weapons in Deathly Hallows. So the mandrakes are a big part of this. We have to have the first defense against the dark arts lesson with Lockhart and the Cornish Pixies. This is because we need to set him up being the fraud, and it doesn't need to be a big reveal he's a fraud. We can see he's useless from day one. The fact that the girls are smitten by him, the fact that none of the guys are, there's comedy in that, and I think the second film did a great example of building him up and the fact he's in love with himself, but there's something else going on. You can really play that up in the early episodes. You know, we've had him in episode 2 doing the book signing. We can have him in episode 3 being a terrible teacher, and we're going to start to have people questioning him more and more as the year goes on, the episodes go by. So we can have this sort of, not, I don't want to keep saying montage, but we can just have them in lessons that are going there and back, seeing different teachers, new classes, new teachers, new subjects, things they need to learn, things that will be important, things that won't be important. We need to start bringing in the year ones, as I mentioned already. We've got Colin McCreevy, who essentially stalks Harry throughout the year, a muggle-born kid, and Harry's this sort of hero that he wants to be close to. We've also got Justin Finch-Fletchley, who we know is a victim who needs a little bit of development in this too, and he's going to crop up in the later books too. So this is a character who has a right to be there, and I think one thing I didn't get to speak about in season 1 is the fact that I'd love the show to develop the ideas that the students in the houses take lessons with other houses. So you might have been in a lesson with someone for an entire year. You know, if you're a Gryffindor, you're stuck with Slytherin, you're stuck with them. You might not get the Ravenclaws to Hufflepuffs. And I think so few Hufflepuffs get developed in the books. This is someone you can do who's got a big part later on. So yeah, bringing Justin Finch-Fletchley through that herbology lesson a little bit more, but have Colin McCreevy in the background, obviously following Harry around as that overexcitable year one. And I also want to bring Quidditch back. This is a huge part of what I wanted to do in the first season, especially when we get into the third season, or the third book, I could say. We need to have training lessons. We need to have Wood being obsessed with winning Quidditch this year. They can talk about the fact that Harry was injured last year, that he missed his chance, that they were desperate for him to be involved, but he couldn't be. So we need to play up the fact that we really want them to win this Quidditch Cup, that this is a super Gryffindor team. So you can bring in Quidditch training. And where we're going to sort of go with that is by bringing the Quidditch training, the importance of it. You can then start to bring in the Malfoy Quidditch stuff. The fact that Slytherin have got the new broomsticks, the fact that Malfoy's done a stroll and he's been, bought everyone on the team broomsticks and now he's part of that team. You can play that up, but if you just have that and no other Quidditch stuff, it's going to stand out very bizarrely just to get the Mudblood sequence. So it's important to have a bit of Quidditch built up first in that first season, at the start of the second one, to have the importance of it, the fact that when we get introduced to the concept Mudblood, that is like the insult of insults within Harry Potter. There are kids at the end of the day. So to have it through sport, which reflects probably what words that a lot of kids in day-to-day do find out through going to sports matches, stuff like that, it really does add to it. The fact that Malfoy says something to Hermione just because he was corrected, the fact it's the Slytherins that they're laughing, the fact they're all purebloods, the fact the Gryffindors are insulted, they want to fight and go for him. Obviously you've got the sequences of Ron and his wand not working because it's broken, because that's got a big part of the finale. So we can then have the sequence of Hagrid, and this will be a big part of this episode, which is finding out the concept of a Mudblood. The Muggleborns are looked at differently, they're spoken about differently, there's a slur term for them, and we can start to go into more of the pure blood families and how people are with them. We can bring the fact the Weasleys are theoretically a traditional, I think there's 28 noble families and the Weasleys are one of them, but they've always been called blood traitors because they don't care. We can talk about the fact that some blood families aren't all clean, but they just say they are for the sake of it. So this is a wider conversation that's got a big part of the villain of this season and why he chooses to do what he does alongside the future seasons as to what the overarching story is. So this is a massive scene that's got to have a big part, and Hagrid's got to be able to deliver it in the right way. And where I want the season to end, where I want episode 3 to end, is on the detention that Harry does with Gilderoy, that he's hearing this basilisk sound. We don't know it's a basilisk, he doesn't know what it is. Lockhart can't hear anything. We need to play the fact that he's a past tongue and he doesn't know what that means yet. And I think that's a good way to end it, because it's starting to add the mystery of what's that thing going on. And that's how we round out the third episode. Episode 4, Death Day Party. So I spoke about in episode 3 how I need this to establish the school year. We're going to move forward time and the first attack happens in October. I want to sort of jump into October, the 4th episode. We've had a bit of montage. We spoke before about lessons are ongoing, things are happening. I really want to play up the Filch side of things now. And that's such a weird word to say, people don't know this, but there's a path and a connection with the victims to Harry Potter. I mentioned Justin Finch-Fletchley earlier. Obviously the first victim of this is Mrs. Norris, and the fact that Harry just randomly, quote, has it out for him. We need to establish the fact that Harry has gone into Filch's office and he's found out that Filch is a squib and that Filch has lost his mind. Now that gets to develop Filch a tiny bit more, explains the way he is of people, and Filch does get some development with that, but it sets up a divide through them. and that's an important divide for later on in this episode when we do get to the first victim. But before we get to that victim, we want to kind of do this book accurate, and where I'm kind of going with this, with the title of this episode, is having the death day party with all the ghosts. It's a very weird scene, and I think it's a scene that will work as a lot of fun on TV. It's a scene that I understand why it was cut from the film. The Nearly Headless Nick has like a death day party for his, it's like when they celebrate when he died. Of course, he didn't fully die and he became a ghost afterwards. We can play at the fact there's all this mouldy food there, that the fact they can't eat it, and the fact they sacrificed the Halloween feast to have this event here, and the fact Harry goes to this event specifically. I quite like that, and that's a great way to take him out to lead into them finding that first victim of being petrified, which is Mrs. Norris. And obviously we've got the message on the wall, with the Chamber of Secrets has been reopened. This is going to be a huge part, and we're in episode 4 out of 8, so we're heading into the middle of the season at this point in time. Whilst we've had our fun at the beginning, we've had a little bit of needle and get a break before getting back to Hogwarts. This is where it's going to really ramp up now, which is where episode 3 had to end with the basilisk sound. We need to have the lesson on the Chamber of Secrets, and Professor Binns is obviously the most important character for this. Whilst in the film it's McGonagall that delivers the speech, and a great speech it is, it's through the most boring lesson that Professor Binns tells them about the Chamber of Secrets. Everyone's dying to know what happened. So we can have his story and his overview of the fact that there was, rumours or myth that there was a Chamber of Secrets added in by Salazar. So that we can really play up the flashbacks. Play up the founders, because I want to do this through flashbacks whilst we've got Professor Binns telling the story, and we can have his narration. So I'd love like a proper thespian to essentially play him for the series, just to get this one scene of narration that's going to be so important. We can start to bring in a younger Gryffindor, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw. We can have them building the school together or montaging through them, setting things up, and then where we've got to go with it is into the fallout of Slytherin leaving, and this idea that there is a hidden chamber that nobody knows about. It's so important for this season. It's so important for the mystery and for the school itself. If you're building the school to have a character, which we know it does have, when you have things like the Room of Requirement that the school wants to fight back, we need to see the founders. They don't just need to be chocolate frog cards to get the studio tour. Like, we actually need to see something from them, and I think this goes a long way in doing so, and it'd be very cool. And obviously we know the importance of Slytherin and his heritage, where it does go in later seasons, so this is like the essential part of this episode. I actually have this as more important as the first petrifying victim, but I'm not going to end the episode with this. I want to end the episode on them discovering the concept of Polyjuice Potion, so that they can work it out. To then say, okay, we need to find out what's going on, and we're just going to say it's Malfoy, because like the first season they blame Snape, second season they've got it out for Malfoy, and we're going to have to develop that, and that's a great way of bringing Polyjuice Potion to end the fourth episode of the second season with them saying, okay, this is what we're going to need to do. Episode 5, Polyjuice Potion. So I want to open the 5th episode with the Quidditch match. We need to see the Slytherin broomsticks, we need to see the divide. This is a huge ramification as to what goes on, and I think this is where the story's going to ramp up a little bit more. We obviously have to end this with Harry winning, with Malfoy losing, being embarrassed. Whether you want to bring Lucius in, that's up to the showrunners. I don't mind that. But we have to obviously start also building up to the fact that Gilderoy Lockhart is a fraud. So we have the moment where the bludger turns on him. We know and find out in the future when it's going to be Dobby, but we need to play this up where they think it could be a variety of different things, but we've got to have Lockhart messing up Harry's wrist. And this is the beauty of TV, is that when I say Quidditch match, I've said that in about 20 seconds. We could get like 10-15 minutes of Quidditch. Maybe 10 minutes is probably pushing it, but we can really develop the Quidditch game. And if we've been building up to it with Quidditch training, with sessions, we've seen how important this is to people at Oliver Wood. It'd be great to see a little bit more, and you can spend more time with Quidditch in these earlier seasons. So we have to really nail this match, and we have to make it this big ordeal that Harry ends up in the hospital wing overnight, because that is going to lead us into the fact that Colin has been petrified, and there has been a second student has been petrified. And we need to start adding fear to Hogwarts. We need to start thinking students think, okay, someone somewhere is doing something bad. There's been a second victim, and we can't get photos that, they can open his camera, it's going to pop in their face. I love that. You can still do that again. But we're really playing at the fact that Harry is the one that was there. And then that's when we can bring Dobby back into it too, that we've got Dobby there with Harry in the hospital, telling him it was him, that he's behind it. You can play up a bit of comedy with that. But the core of this episode isn't going to be that. It's after the recovery where we're going to start to get the Polyjuice Potion stuff. I want to play up the angle that they skip going away for Christmas this year because they have to brew this potion over a month. It's a great way to transition from Halloween, past Halloween, into winter, into Christmas. We don't need it to be a big Christmas ordeal because we know that it's part of it. But the Polyjuice Potion is the core of this episode, and we know it's obviously something that crops up in later seasons. You know, obviously Mad-Eye Moody, the Seven Potters, so many other situations. So this is a big thing to bring in. And where I kind of want to go with it in the 5th episode, before we get from making the potion to actually the sequences with it, we need to bring in the dueling club. We need to bring in Harry and Malfoy having the duel. The school witnessing that Harry is a Parseltongue, because this is important to his character, and again to the Voldemort connections for later on. We need to see the other students' reaction to it. When Harry thinks he's protecting Justin Finch-Fletchley, and the whole school thinks no, he's not, he's doing the opposite. Where people might now start to think Harry is the heir of Slytherin, not Draco Malfoy. I love this idea. I love the fact they're going to get it wrong, all these kids, but it's a very important sequence to have, and then we can have Justin being attacked. So whilst I did and ah about having 2 students petrified in one episode, I think it does work for the structure of the season. And where I want this episode to end is them having the secrets of Crabbe and Goyle, having the Polyjuice Potion, being in Slytherin Common Room, and finding out from Malfoy himself that Harry Potter's the heir of Slytherin, or that's what he believes it to be. It rules Malfoy out. It's a great cliffhanger, and it adds that concern to Harry after the Parseltongue stuff. I think that's the best way to end the 5th episode, because we need to start really ramping up, not towards the finale, but we've had the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets. We're seeing people being attacked. The fact that Muggleborn's being attacked. Now we've got the information people think it may be Harry. It's going to really start ramping up now. I mean, start developing where that goes. Episode 6, Tom Riddle. So the 6th episode's a fun one. Obviously, we can open up with Hermione not being part of the group for Polyjuice Potion, that it went wrong. We can have it time-lapsing across January of her recovering in the hospital wing, because like the first season and like the 3rd and others to come, we've got to cover a calendar year doing the show. So we can't have 8 cliffhangers in a row. It's got to sustain itself and develop, which at times does mean time-lapses. And I think the 3rd film did a great view of that when it goes from like winter into spring following the birds. So this one's going to really kicks out on Valentine's Day. We're going to have them finding the diary of Tom Riddle. Tom Riddle at this point in time, who is unknown to Harry, who's unknown to Ron, Hermione and others. By them finding the diary, we can play up the communication side of it. We can have Harry writing into it, him having the stories of Tom Riddle, building a bit of a relationship with this Tom Riddle individual who was at Hogwarts before. We can play at the fact that Ron mentioned that he saw his name in the trophy cabinet, that he was giving a special award once, that this was a distinguished student. But there's not much more else there about Tom Riddle, is there? So we can play this up. And what I want to do with this episode in particular, we can have him going back and finding out through the flashbacks that Hagrid had this beast, and that's the reason Hagrid went to Azkaban for. It explains why he doesn't have a wand. We can go into that, but we're going to get Tom Riddle's point of view on what happened in the 2nd year. And the 2nd year, preceding obviously the 2nd year, the original Chamber of Secrets. So we've got to build up a bit of a relationship there. And what I then want to do with this is then build up to the diary being stolen again, Gryffindor common room, well, their bedroom being ransacked, which meant it was another student, because non-Gryffindors can't get in there, can they? So we've got to play that up. And that's a lot to do very quickly, but it's totally understandable, and I think it would work. The fact that obviously we're going to find out who it is in 2 episodes' time. I want to bring up the next Quidditch match, where we're going to obviously have it be cancelled because Hermione's been attacked. And this is the most important thing. I've not really spoken about Hermione too much in the first 2 seasons. She hasn't had as much to do, neither has Ron ever, because I know I'm looking at an overview of it, and it is technically Harry Potter, his story. But the key part of Hermione being attacked is it takes her off the board. Okay, so I had it again. The camera goes out of charge. I'm still figuring out, because I don't normally do long-term videos, but I was talking about Hermione being taken off the board. And this is essential to the season, because we need to see Harry and Ron being able to solve their problems about Hermione. The same in the 3rd one, we get to see Harry and Hermione doing it together without Ron there. We need to build up the relationships of both of these with Harry, also them as a trio, but them being able to do things by themselves. And we always know it ends up with Harry on his own at the end when it comes down to it. But by having Hermione being attacked, them losing the brains of the trio, the concern really coming into the school now, that's another Muggle-born being attacked. The Chamber of Secrets really has been opened, and there is a threat. So we're going to have Harry and Ron going down to Hagrid's to confront him about this Tom Riddle, about what they'd seen or what they'd heard, about what had happened last time. And whilst we're there, we're obviously going to get the humongous revelation, or I guess we could say the formal introduction of Cornelius Fudge. So we're going to have Dumbledore and Fudge going in, Hagrid essentially having to have been sacked as gamekeeper, Dumbledore being against it, but the fact that there are others for it, i.e. Fudge. Now, we know we're going to get Fudge in the first season. The context of that is unknown. It was always weird to know that this is the first time he's seen, and we know how important he becomes, especially in that fifth one. So I don't mind the first and a bit of Wizarding World context of this is who the Minister of Magic is. Maybe he pops up in a couple of papers or something somewhere. But for this one, this is the first time Harry's going to see and meet him in person. And whilst Harry doesn't meet him in person, he's in the room in the invisibility cloak, where you get to see Fudge's weakness, the fact that he's leaning on Dumbledore. We can really use this team to develop the Fudge-Dumbledore relationship, because where it is going to go wrong at the end of the fourth book. And it's essential that we have the moments where Hagrid is unfortunately sacked with Dumbledore being against it. What we can then bring in is the fact that Lucius Malfoy is here, and Dumbledore has been he's been suspended by the governors. And we have a very triumphant Lucius Malfoy in doing this. We can then play at the fact that Fudge doesn't agree with this, but isn't going to say anything, because we know that Fudge is also in the pocket of Malfoy. So we can really start to bring in the political triangle between them all, because we know the importance of this when we get later on into Order of the Phoenix. So this is a really important scene, and it's a weird way to end the episode, but it is them in Hagrid's hut, with Hagrid being sacked, Dumbledore being suspended, Fudge and Malfoy walking out. It's fine to end the episode this way, and we can just have a little trail of spiders as a great way to lead into what follows. Episode 7, Aragog. As you may notice by the title for this one, this is obviously going to be the Aragog episode. Having Harry and Ron going back into the forest, the same forest they did. Well, Ron wasn't part of the Forbidden Forest in the Philosopher's Stone, so that's going to work out well that we can really play at Ron's fears, because Neville was the one that was there, not Ron. The fact he's scared of spiders, the fact he has a wand that doesn't work. We can introduce Aragog. We can talk about his relationship with Hagrid. We can talk about the fact that, there's a beast that they won't say the name of, that isn't this spider, that it does by default clear Hagrid's name. Whilst this horrible spider is sat here in a forest with its descendants wanting to kill these two children. We can bring in the car. We can have the big escape scene. And this is kind of where the pros of the shorter books come into play, that we can do all this in the first half of an episode, that it doesn't need to be that big a deal, because where I want this one to go and to end with is a cliffhanger for the finale, very similar to the first one, but we have to have them visiting Hermione in the hospital and them working out that she has, she was in the library, she had a basilisk page in her hand, she'd mentioned about the pipes. The mystery is starting to be unveiled of who and what this thing is and how they are meant to try and stop it. So we can have them then go into Lockhart. We can then bring up the fact that we've got this moment where Ginny's been taken to the Chamber of Secrets. They've got the message, the final message, that it will be opened, blah, blah, blah. We know where it's going to go with that. The teachers are scared, but we can really play up the Lockhart stuff now, that he claims he knows what's happened, that he can stop it. So we're going to have Harry and Ron going to him with the information. We're going to get the revelation of him running, the fact that he's a fraud, that they're going to essentially take him to the bathroom, then working out the fact that Moaning Myrtle was the victim. And where I want to go with this is going back to that cold open I spoke about, of we're going to get them talking to Myrtle about how she died. We can then get the full cold open scene. We'd have seen a little bit more from it with Tom Riddle's diary and the flashback, but that's a selective flashback. We'd be able to get a lot more details, but this time from Myrtle, from her point of view of how she died and what happened. And that's going to lead into Harry opening the chamber in the bathroom for the cliffhanger of them going into the Chamber of Secrets for the season finale. Episode 8, The Chamber of Secrets. So this is probably going to be one of the funner ones, and I do think until we get to the later seasons, the finales are always going to be the really big episode, the triumphant one. It's the final act, it's the final part of the book. The mystery is being unveiled as to how they can solve it and what they can do. And for this one in particular, the Chamber of Secrets is massive, because it's going to start to build up the Harry-Voldemort relationship. The surprise of the first one is obviously the fact that Voldemort was in the back of Quirrell's head and that Snape wasn't evil all along. Whereas this one, we're obviously going to get to meet Tom Riddle, find out he was Voldemort, but before we get to that, we need to have the moment in which Lockhart loses his memory. The fact that Ron's wand rebounds on them, they're unable to save, not save the day, but he's unable to wipe their memory that he's going to leave them all to die and whatnot. And that's huge. And that's, you know, another defense against the dark arts teacher gone. And we can then have the moment where we get Harry on his own having to go into the chamber. And this is what excites me the most. And we'll go back to when I was sort of 6 years old seeing it at the cinema. I do remember the Chamber of Secrets, and I think it was my favourite for quite a while. It's obviously not as I'm older, film-wise I do mean. But I loved the Tom Riddle actor they cast in that one, especially compared to the later ones, which I don't think worked at all, and that he just looked like a psychopath rather than this good-looking student who charms everybody into submission. His weapon is how believable and real he is and appears to them, whereas behind the scenes that he is this terrible, beyond evil person. And we're going to get to see that a bit more. We're going to get the Tom Riddle coming back. We're going to get the revelation that Ginny's going to die. We're going to get him finding out that he knows who Harry Potter is, that it stops his future self. Now, we can have the full story of Tom Riddle and what he did, and we can have him narrating that and saying that and piecing that story together again, going back to the cold open a little bit more, but knowing that he was behind it all, not Hagrid, that he set Hagrid up. I like all of that. And obviously what we need to do, and kind of what I need to do more importantly of this one, is planting the seeds for Half-Blood Prince. Because Voldemort put his soul into this diary. That's a living part of Voldemort, and his plan is to come back to life through this diary. We know this is a Horcrux, but Harry doesn't know. Neither does Dumbledore yet. We're going to know in 4 books' time. So it's essential for them to work around that they are dealing with an actual Horcrux at this point in time, that he has that knowledge to come back to life, to be the person he's going to be. The revelation that Tom Marvolo Gaunt means, or Tom Marvolo Riddle, Tom Marvolo Riddle means Lord Voldemort. I am Lord Voldemort specifically. And I love this moment. And obviously that's going to leave to us getting the Sorting Hat coming in before we get the sword. That we're going to have the Sorting Hat coming in with Fawkes. We're going to have the Basilisk coming out, being blinded by Fawkes, Tom Riddle being frustrated. We know how it goes from that piece. This is the action episode. And it is going to be how can a 12-year-old thwart this Basilisk that's been in there for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, that only the heir of Slytherin can control. The great knowledge that it's being controlled by Parseltongue. The fact it gets blind makes it easier to have the fight with it. We have to have the Sword of Godric Gryffindor come into this, because that's so essential, and we know it's part of the season, but it's essential for the long-term storytelling too. Fawkes is essential to that. The Sorting Hat is essential to that. This is one of the most important scenes of the entire 7 seasons. This is them destroying the first Horcrux without their knowledge, and it has to be built upon a challenge as difficult as it can be. So by the time you get around to it, of having the sword killing the Basilisk, the fact that its venom becomes part of the sword, I think I'm always a bit confused by that, which then makes it powerful enough to destroy a Horcrux. Alongside the Basilisk fans, it's about like absorbing the materials. We'll find out more in the 7th book. This is essential to have this action sequence. This is the big moment. And I love the design of the original Chamber of Secrets. It's one of my favourite sets of the entire film series. No idea how they're going to do this again. But we obviously have to have them leaving the chamber, with Ginny being alive, her going through her story of what happened, of how she was possessed by Voldemort. A little bit more detail on her in this. We can show her throughout the school year. The fact that the diary was slipped to her at the start, it became part of her. She talked to it, it wrote back to her, it learned about Harry, that she fancied him and so much more. This is integral for her character arc, that she ends up essentially being a victim. So when you get to later books and later seasons with the return of Voldemort, there is a character who has been through those experiences, and we need to really develop her relationship with Harry, something which understandably the films didn't get as much time to do. And at the times of obviously the film was being made, the books were still being written, so there wasn't a closed door on their relationship, whereas we know where it's going to lead to now. So this is essential. And where I kind of want to go with this is having Dumbledore's office. The Weasley family there, the fact Ginny's okay, the school's going to get back to normal, great. But you can have Harry and Dumbledore discussing the magic, Harry giving him the sword, giving him the diary. We know this is a Horcrux tease. We know this is going to crop up in 4 years' time. So we can leave it on basically a sign for Dumbledore to do a bit of research on, can't we? Harry doesn't need to worry about it for now, because he doesn't know about it for now. Whereas Dumbledore might know a little bit more about dark magic. So that is not even the end of the season. And I feel like I'm out of breath, and I don't need to be. But I'm trying to not make sure this camera runs out of battery again. We have to have the sequence of Lucius Malfoy and Dobby, because Harry, knowing that Malfoy's the reason that he put the diary into Ginny, he technically tried to commit murder. The fact he does go to murder Harry in this because he frees his elf. We need to build up Dobby saving Harry. It won't be the first time he saves Harry from a Malfoy either. The fact Dobby's now a free elf is a big part of his story and his character arc. It's a great, lovely little way to end it. You can then have the feast and the victims all coming back because the mandrakes have been brewed into the potion that they need. We can have this triumphant end to the second season. The fact that the end of year the end of year exams were cancelled, the school is back to normal, everything is hunky dory. Let's have them getting back to King's Cross on the train, saying goodbye for another summer, and ending it for what obviously is going to be the start of the third season. So that's how I would do the second season. I don't know what people think of that. If I feel like I missed anything big or important, please do tell me, please do comment. I don't know if this is going to be shorter or longer than the first one. I guess I'll find out when I'm editing it, but that's everything I've got to say in the Chamber of Secrets. So this is a weekly series, and any feedback's appreciated. I will look at any comments, ideas, things you like, things you don't. But we will be back next Thursday with a discussion on The Prisoner of Azkaban, which is my favourite film, so I'm excited to talk about how it could potentially work as a TV series. Even though it's not my favourite book, I leave that there as a tease. So that is me rounding out. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.